It seems like it's out of a telenovela, a soap opera, what's been happening this week in Washington, D.C. when it comes to this impeachment trial. And I think last we spoke to our next guest, Dr. Cogley, we hadn't heard of this revelation of John Bolton's manuscript. And he sent this book, because he's writing a book, for those of you that do not know. He's writing a book, sent the manuscript to Washington, or to the White House, I'm sorry, to see, hey, is there anything classified in this book that I cannot publish? Long story short, it's somehow something got leaked to the New York Times, and here we are. But of course, that's the question. Will they call witnesses? Will they not call witnesses? And I know that today they're doing the questions and answers, and there's just so much going on. Joining us on 710 KURV is Dr. Nathaniel Cogley, who teaches political science at Tarleton State University. Dr. Cogley, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Now, there is hope or light at the end of the tunnel, because on ABC News, it says that maybe by this weekend, it'll all be over. What do you think?
Yeah, we're starting to hear word that there might not be votes for witnesses, and they might move for a final judgment, in which case we would expect a not guilty vote. But it's so close. I mean, the Republicans have 53 senators. There are some Democrats who are likely to vote not guilty, like Joe Manchin in West Virginia or Doug Jones in Alabama. But they would like to say, yes, we should have witnesses, and then, get to that not guilty vote. So they're not on board not having these witnesses. And you have someone like Mitt Romney, who's firmly on board wanting witnesses. Susan Collins is on board. Well, that's two right there. And we've talked about Lisa Murkowski, maybe Cory Gardner, maybe Lamar Alexander. But the words coming out of D.C. is that probably there's not a third vote. So McConnell may have 51 Republicans ready to proceed to judgment. And, of course, it'd be wild if it was a 50-50 tie because of the issue of Roberts breaking that tie or not.
Why do you think, like you mentioned, Collins and Romney, why do you think they're up for witnesses when a majority of Republicans aren't? Or even if some Democrats do decide to vote not guilty already, will having witnesses change anybody's mind?
They're up for it for different reasons. So Susan Collins is from a swing state. She's from Maine. Hillary Clinton won Maine. It's good politics for her to want to be as patient and thorough as possible and to say, no, I hadn't made up my mind yet. I waited out. Maybe I even wanted to hear from a witness or two, but I didn't make up my mind. I wasn't quick to judge. That's a swing state type of mindset. Romney's a different case. He's from Utah. That's a very solid Trump state. Trump won it by 15 or 18 points. There was a third-party candidate who also got double digits. But it's a solid Republican state. So Romney has this animosity with Trump. They don't get along well. It's a very public display. So they might be on there for different reasons. But someone like Lisa Murkowski that's been on the fence, she's from Alaska. That's not a swing state. That's not a close state. That's good politics for her. And I think, this Bolton addresses the question of, did Trump do what they're alleging he did, right? But the prosecution needs to prove 2 points. One, that he did what they're alleging, and two, that what they're alleging warrants conviction and removal from office, which is an entirely separate thing. I've always argued that at most we should have a civil case in U.S. District Court. That's something Kenneth Starr was making in his presentation as well.
If there's a big if, they do decide to call witnesses and John Bolton does get called, would his testimony make a difference, say, tomorrow, whenever he's called, compared to what Trump tweeted earlier, I think today, that he put game over, and it's a video of Bolton talking about the phone call and how it was great, and pretty much just validating what Trump's been saying this entire time. It was a perfect phone call. Nothing went wrong. So who would you like? Would you believe that, John Bolton or this John Bolton?
Right, and we have lots of videos of the representatives and senators themselves saying the opposite thing when it was Clinton on trial on both sides. So the fact that we have Bolton saying something very different when he was in the administration. I'm not sure that Bolton is a game changer. He may change a few votes, but he doesn't change the outcome of this. There were a lot of he's not that close. So Fiona Hill, in her testimony, I believe, she said she heard Bolton tell her, I'm not part of the drug deal. Sondland and Mulvaney are cooking up. In other words, he said, I'm not even close to this thing. Maybe he presumes, maybe he assumes, like Sondland when he testified, I thought that was going on, but I didn't have firsthand testimony. And so he's already shown he's not that close to it. And then in the original New York Times thing that came out, what I caught was that they said Bolton had heard an answer from Trump that Trump preferred to wait until he gets information on the Russia investigation. Well, there's two things in there. One, preferred. Trump has a lot of preferences that he's vocal about. He wants to end the filibuster in the Senate. He wants to add term limits for Congress. A preference isn't a policy. And two, he specifically says Russia investigation. If we remember on the call with Trump to the President Zelensky of Ukraine, there's requests for two investigations. One is the Biden's activities with Burisma, but the other one is the CrowdStrike server from the 2016 investigation. So I'm not sure that both, and later reports citing the New York Times flipped it into Hunter and Joe Biden, which the New York Times wasn't that clear.
Joining us on 710 KURV is Dr. Nathaniel Cogley, who teaches political science at Tarleton State University.
Yeah, this is Davis Rankin. It's been reported that part of the reason why the president behaved as he did, or the administration behaved as it did with Ukraine, is the belief that it was Ukraine that principally or totally messed with our election and hacked into the Democratic
DNC server,
the Democratic National Committee server, and not the Russians, or not the Russians at all, or not the Russians principally. What do you make of that? That notion's been poo-pooed by our intelligence people.
Well, those aren't mutually exclusive. So that's what the Democratic side has been saying. The president saying it was Ukraine, not Russia, and the other side would say, well, it's not mutually exclusive. Maybe both countries were involved, because the two countries are rivals. They may have been on different sides. And even within Ukraine, you got to understand, Ukraine has a Ukrainian-speaking population. It also has a Russian-speaking population. Their politics can be much more divisive than Russian, which is a much more organized, dictatorial state. So, I mean, none of that's clear, but it's all suspicious. A lot of activities in Ukraine are suspicious. And if a president thinks there's something there, he may have a legitimate reason to request an investigation. That's not a quote-unquote, impeachable offense.
Well, I understand that and don't disagree, but our intelligence people are quoted as saying we've looked into that and we've told the administration there's nothing to that.
But what does it have to do with the impeachment trial?
Part of the reason why the president behaved as he did was because he thought Ukraine had something to do with messing with the election. Ukraine was somehow, some way, it's all been vague is what's been reported. But if there's no evidence of it other than what somebody says, I mean, the president can't go around doing things to countries based on gossip.
Well, I would say, I don't want to speak for the president, but I know he's been suspicious of some of these agencies and what they've been up to.
Yeah.
We got to understand the CIA does not appear in the Constitution. The CIA is there to inform the president, to provide information to the president who makes the decisions and who runs the executive branch.
Now you're going back to the security state arguments of the early 50s, no?
Well, the president's at the top. The CIA is there to work with the president, under the president. It's not, the CIA doesn't tell him what to think or what to do.
I remember we talked about executive privilege when we learned, I think, by you, that if Congress really wanted to get these witnesses in the House, they could have gone to a court and they could have probably even had Bolton or whoever else they wanted as a witness, but they didn't do that extra step. And then they said, oh, it's obstruction of Congress. We're going to impeach him for that, when they could have done their due diligence and whatever. But if they do call Bolton, we know that withholding witnesses doesn't fall under the umbrella of executive privilege, but are there certain things that Bolton can and cannot say under executive privilege?
Well, that might need to be litigated. We didn't see that in the Clinton trial when they had depositions from 3 witnesses. Those took place pretty quickly, within a week. So if there is a fight over Bolton's testimony, that might need to play out. There might be a dispute. But one interesting thing is the president's counsel has made the point quite clear, and I thought it was interesting, that a lot of their arguments for not providing witnesses to the House committees was not technically an executive privilege argument. That what they did is they said, you cannot subpoena anybody because you have not had a House floor vote on the matter. It says the House has the power of impeachment, not Nancy Pelosi and a committee she organized. And the House did not vote on their House Resolution 660 authorizing actually an official impeachment inquiry until October 31st, and many of these witnesses were requested before October 31st.
So doesn't it kind of like null and void this whole thing?
No.
I mean, maybe not null and void it, but kind of like, you're kind of contradicting yourself, people in Congress.
Well, we've never seen an impeachment with a divided Congress, with one party with the House and one party with the Senate. And we see how procedurally that's created all sorts of quirky things with her delaying. And now we get this argument out of the Senate. Not only is what happened not even potentially a crime, even if it did happen, but also the fact, as we see on this trial, the impeachment trial shuts down the Senate. It can't do anything else. They're sitting there captive, silent, with no cell phone. The Senate's not doing any other business. When in fact on the House side, they do it through a Judiciary Committee or Intelligence Committee. The House can proceed on other matters. And so the senators are making this argument that really it's not appropriate for them to be the investigative body. If you guys have more witnesses, you guys should be able to do that because you guys can juggle more things. This shuts us down, and we shouldn't be shut down right now.
Well, hopefully at the end of the day, it's over sooner rather than later. I know you got to go, Dr. Cogley. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your day to speak to us. That's Dr. Nathaniel Cogley, our guest on 710 KURV.